Dune Part 2 is bigger, deeper, and darker. And no, I'm not talking about the popcorn buckets. Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connell, the managing editor at Cinema Blend, here with a spoiler-free review of the new Denis Villeneuve film Dune Part 2. Highly anticipated movie that we've been looking forward to seeing ever since the first film ended, and we learned that that was only an adaptation of the first half of Frank Herbert's infamous book. We've also been waiting for Dune Part 2 because it's one of the films that got delayed after the strike. It caused production delays, and studios decided to shift their calendars around. And now Dune, which feels like either a big summer movie, a type of blockbuster, or even a movie that you would see in the fall and maybe hold for award season, is instead coming in March, which is, again, fine because it gives us something really good to look forward to at the beginning half of the year, but it does feel a little bit unusual that we're going to be talking about Dune Part 2 now, as the film is getting close to reaching theaters, but then also, I would assume, over the course of the year. This is going to be a big Oscar contender for Warner Brothers, and I will tell you why in a hot second. While you're here on our YouTube channel, please hit subscribe. Turn on your notifications as we drop new videos. You guys will be the first persons to hear about it. But in the meantime, you're here to learn more about Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2, and I'm going to avoid spoilers altogether, which is strange to say because the book has been around for decades at this point. But I'll stick to things that are in the trailer and things that you would only know from having watched the first movie. You are safe to watch this video without having seen Dune Part 2. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that this is harder science fiction than the previous film. There are a lot of references throughout Dune to Star Wars. And by that, I mean, people think that George Lucas essentially took a lot of Frank Herbert's inspirations and put them into Star Wars. And Star Wars is mainstream, kind of popcorn culture science fiction. Then there is the sort of headier, bigger themes, epic topics that can be found in science fiction, and a lot of that is found in Dune Part 2. Now, the irony is that it almost feels like Denis Villeneuve is empowered by the success of the first movie, that he realized that people really loved what he did with Dune Part 1, so he poured more of the religious overtones and the political overtones into Dune Part 2 because he figured that the audience wanted to see more of that. That can't be the case necessarily, because he started filming Dune Part 2 before Dune Part 1 even came out. Like, he didn't really do them back to back, but he was heavily involved in Dune Part 2 before he even knew how the first one was going to play. So it is kind of more impressive that throughout the course of this adaptation, we do get a lot more into the political landscapes of the different planets that are available as part of the story. The rise of Paul Atreides and the way that he has to maneuver through the Freeman culture, and then also to get back into the political battles that are waiting for him. But this huge undertone of whether Paul is the messiah of the Fremen community that exists out in the sand dunes. So there's a lot to bite off and chew on, and it's part of the story. This was going to be necessary for Denis Villeneuve to get into as he started to adapt the back half of Frank Herbert's novel. But I will say that having, just rewatched the first one, I found that story to be a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more accessible. Not that all of the stuff isn't there waiting for you in Dune Part 2, but you got to sit down for a meal as opposed to the first movie, which probably feels a lot more like a popcorn roller coaster than this weighty, substantial film that you're going to get out of Dune Part 2. I definitely want to praise the entire cast for evolving with the material. There are certain actors who didn't get as much to do in Dune Part 1 who expand here. I'm looking at Javier Bardem and Zendaya, who had smaller parts in Part 1, but were still sort of significant to the story that were being told. They were almost like placeholders put in of like, okay, they're going to be really important later, especially with Zendaya's character, because Paul Atreides was daydreaming about her or realizing that she was going to be a big part of his journey, and she is in this film. They get a lot more to do and really run with the material, as does Timothée Chalamet, who I have to give a ton of credit for evolving and maturing in the part of Paul. And it's been really fascinating to see. We talked about this with the actors at the junket, that when Timothée took over the first Dune, he hadn't really been the lead of a major blockbuster before. And now at this point, he has evolved into the place where he can carry a film like Wonka or even Dune Part 2 And you can see his relationship with, I'll use Josh Brolin as an example. In the first film, you know, Brolin's character very much treats Paul like an up and coming kid, still the son of the Duke, played by Oscar Isaac. But in this one, they get to the position where, you know, Paul is a leader and he has to command Gurney, who's played by Josh Brolin, to do a lot of things to help win the battle that's being staged in this movie. And Timothy feels like he carries that part. Like, Timothée Chalamet is evolving as an actor in front of our eyes, and I think material like Dune is helping him to do this. Incredible performances across the board also by Austin Butler, Christopher Walken, Dave Bautista is fantastic in this. You do miss Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho, and I missed Oscar Isaac. There's still a shadow that he casts over this story, Duke Leto being out of the picture at this point. You're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned Florence Pugh yet. I think she gives a great performance, but everything that I can really talk about with her character is spoilery and important to the back half of the story. And even stories to come. So I will just say that she's great. She's fantastic. She fits into the ensemble fantastic. It's similar-ish to the way that Zendaya was sprinkled throughout the first movie, but becomes more significant later. And while it was great to see Florence Pugh joining this ensemble, as well as one or two other cameos you can look out for, her performance, I think, promises more of what's to come if Denis Villeneuve is able to continue on and make Dune Messiah as he wants to do with his third film. In general, Denis Villeneuve asks a lot of his cast in order to rise in the material and meet the expectations that come with the religious and political overtones that are part of this story. And for the most part, all of them rise to the challenge. They are a huge part of the reason why Dune Part 2 works as well as it does. Okay, so what you're basically hearing from me is that I preferred Dune Part 1 just a tad more than Dune Part 2. And this isn't really fair to say because I want to sit down with Dune Part 2 like immediately. I know that there's so much to dig into, but I prefer the simplicity of the first movie a little bit more. It's a little more streamlined. It's more House Atreides comes to Arrakis, is going to take over the spice mines, runs into trouble, essentially pushback, and has to fight for their claim to the planet. Because it separates Paul and his mother to go off with the Fremen, and then it explores other cultures and different other parts of the planet that are spinning different stories. It's a lot to take in, and you're following a lot of it as it goes. And it's the source material, and it's Denis being very truthful to the source material and doing an excellent job of staging it. But it's not the type of film where you come out of it and completely understand everything that happened. You're still sort of chewing over a lot of the things that it asks, and it raises some really big questions that do get answered some in the film and do some still linger if you keep going. And again, it's not, I don't really want to fault the film for this because this is a book that's been around forever. You can actually pick up the text and just, you know, thumb through it if you want to and start to explore some of those things. This is a giant universe of stories, and Denis is biting off a big chunk of it and trying to present it in a film adaptation. Really complicated and hard to do. And while I think he does an incredible job at it, I just think if I was sitting down from start to finish, I preferred the simplicity and the sort of streamlined nature of the first part, which moved like a freight train, to this one, which has a lot going on and is going to make you want to go back in and sort of process it a second and third time. Now, all of that being said, this is still Denis Villeneuve, who is a master filmmaker, who has made films like Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, and of course, Dune Part 1 and Part 2. He is a masterful storyteller. He is one of the best science fiction minds that we have going right now. And any chance that you have to see one of his films on the big screen, you jump at it. And so I am highly recommending Dune Part 2. For me, it is a 4.5 out of 5, whereas the first movie was a 5. And I fully expect that when I get a chance to go down and sit down with Dune Part 2 a second time, that is going to move up in stature because I will be able to fully process everything that's going on. It's just a lot of story and a lot of material being sent our way, but done masterfully. I mean, I can't say enough about Villeneuve as a craftsman, as a storyteller. His passion and love for this material clearly shines through. Like I said, the cast rises to the challenge of the deeper explorations on the political side and the religious side that's warranted by the material. Everyone in the cast is amazing. Javier Bardem is so much better this time through because he gets so much more to do. Zendaya is fantastic. I think Chalamet evolves as a leading man. There's so many reasons for me to recommend it. When I give it that slight ding, it's only because I'm comparing it to the first movie, and the first movie is a perfect film. So how are you going to rise to that bar yet again? When you're Denis Villeneuve, you get extremely close to it. And if I get a chance to see it again, maybe he will actually get to that point. I could just be a little bit off because I haven't had a chance to see it, but that's a good problem to have. You want to see these things multiple times. You want to dig in, you want to keep enjoying them. And now, soon, Dune Part 2 will be here in theaters for you guys to enjoy as well. When you get a chance to go see this film, and I demand that you guys go see this in the big screen, go see it in IMAX, go appreciate it the way that it needs to be seen. Come back here, hit the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on Dune Part 2. Now that we have the two of them together, do you want to see Denis continue in this universe? Do you want to see him branch out and try something else different? He's, like I said, told a million fantastic science fiction stories up to this point and can continue to expand, or he can stay in the Dune universe if he wants to. While you're down there, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Every time we put a new video up, you guys will be the first ones to hear about it on Cinema Blend. And in the meantime, guys, enjoy the fact that Dune Part 2 is in theaters. It's waiting for you soon.